What you tell us with the all large with Talan, Deva large water to the Marabella. Or Jitatane, Talan, Milano, Tanatma, Saji to the Dua, Chunsa, but Timothy Zebabichava, Adisha Nataji, Dangala Kubashi, Chujiwata, Landrella Suba, can you detain some injury? Then Chavani Chula Chita in Pavoti, shaking Kanashi, Yakan was the command of Marba. Tajaba Damagun Juloma Cheta in Pavotella, largest of Washington, Sudan, then Luchitajan Niche, Tashan to touch it, then Luchitajan Rebatala, Tayutala Hibblelam Go, Nebachetalam, Niche, Tayutala Hibblelam Go, Taje, Tan Hibbachetalam. Never Jetalem is what the late Marba. Never Jetalem is Jutala
Lamche.
Allah so that the cars over there. Never Jetalem is Jutala Chibuchungu the Marba.
The Lam she.
Lanchi Najalanga Bata and Lanchi Najalanga Bata and the cars over there.
The
Heaven to Niji. Lanchi Najalanga Batala. Lanchi Najala Navache Badala Karzabure.
Som. Jibu Solange and Sona Tamche, Nipa Dunchewa, Sumba, Nipagawa.
What the Mareva? What a thing Barita?
Then the Nipa, the Jibuchon.
Nibelan, Mutalani, Hibelan to the Niji, Lanchi Najala Navacheva, Telan Hibelan to Moy Sajin Indua.
Lessa, then
Tambo, Lanchi Najachiba Telani. Jebuson to Sora Taji Dubi, Sudan, Jebuson Jelanji and Bigun the tributes and such a needed was Nije. Taji Nije, Jebuson Jugune, Jebuson Jelanji and Bigun the tributes and the needed was Nije, Jebuson Jelanji Gune tribute to a kind of dance. The third tribute, the other tribute to say. Sajini, Tombutla Sajima, Jenny Batala, and the Jusengo down Kuba, near the Jusengo to Kuba Nije. What does Sarota?
Lesser.
That Himmel and Sungo, the tongue of the Chunka
Lesser.
Himmel and Sungo, the law, what the Sajit Ma Yabushemba Yabuchonsunan turned out true, but the Sajit, true Suna, and could turn out true. Not to come by this tea. Kambazudil this tea water, tea the same man Kambajuju Chow Marba, and the Langazunayako tea the same good.
Lesser.
What the Sajid Ma, Jamba Yabuchonsunan turned out the Abungan.
So again, we will be going over Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, which is a commentary on Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment. And we'll be looking at the outline that Lama Tsongkhapa puts forward at the beginning, where there are 4 categories of the content to come. So it's very important that we learn this outline, and we learn this outline in a non-mistaken way, because this outline in a non-mistaken way becomes the foundation to all of the practices. This becomes the basis from which we can grow the other practices on. So we need an unerring understanding of this outline so that we can go through the pathways appropriately, and this becomes the foundation to the practice, this outline of the practices. So just like the foundation of a house, which is very important, if the foundation isn't stable and proper and thorough in all ways, then the house won't be held up very properly. The house could be leaning to one side or another and not be stable. And likewise, if a road isn't first have the appropriate grading, if you will, so that it's made, so the basis from which the road is built on is proper, then it'll be bumpy or it won't serve as a good pathway. So likewise, we need an unerring or non-mistaken understanding of this outline so we have the basis from which to practice from. So Lama Tsongkhapa begins with first the greatness of the teaching's author. And here we have the liberation life story of Lord Atisha. So this goes over Lord Atisha's life, who is the author of The Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment, again, which this is a commentary on. The second is the greatness of the teaching itself. Here it shows how all of the teachings that we find in the Kangjur, which are the pronouncements of Lord Buddha, and the Tangjur, the authentic Indian commentaries, are contained within this one text, Atisha's Lamp for the Path to Enlightenment. So this is the second section, the greatness of the teaching itself. The third is the great way to listen to and explain the teachings. And in this section it deals with the appropriate way to listen to and the instruction being given, and then the appropriate way to give the actual instruction. So there's these two categories, how to listen to and how to explain the instructions. And then the fourth category is how to lead students in the actual instructions. And here, it begins with first how to rely upon the teacher, that is the root of the path, and we've gone over this previously. And then the second section is what to do once one has relied upon this teacher. And then once we get to the section on what one does once one has relied upon the teacher, or the stage of the path in which one trains after having relied on the teacher, more literally, then we have two categories. An exhortation to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity, and then how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. So then we've already gone through those categories. Then the next section, so the exhortation to take full advantage of the life of leisure and opportunity has three categories, and then we have the next, which is how to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity, which then begins with a general presentation, how to develop certain knowledge of a general presentation of the path, and then how to take full advantage of leisure and opportunity, or the actual way to take full advantage of leisure and opportunity. And the how to develop certain knowledge of a general presentation of the path has two categories. First category is how all teachings are included within the stages of the path for beings of three capacities. So how all of them are included within the stage of the path for beings of three capacities. And then the purpose and reason for leading students in the stage of the path for beings of three capacities. And that section has two categories. First, the purpose, and second, the reason. So the gupa, the reason and purpose, are the two categories that are found within there. So then, after we get done with the how to develop certain knowledge of a general presentation of the path, then the next category is how to take the actual way to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. So that's the section that we're in. So I just wanted to check the last thing I said. Yes, it was correct. Two categories: how all scriptures are included within three paths of three types of persons, and then two, why students are led in stages. And then there are two categories of that: the purpose, and then the purpose and reason. So there are the two categories, purpose and reason. There's a purpose of leading students by means, and then why one guides. And under the why one guides, then Jutsin, we have two categories, purpose and reason. There are a lot of, the words are a little different in Tibetan, the same in English, so it sounds repetitive, but there are slight differences in the words in the Tibetan, the actual purpose, reason, why. Those three words are important within the Tibetan. Why, purpose, and reason. So just looking at it from the translation of the words, those are the importance in here. So we have how all scriptures are included, if we're looking at the English on page 129, how all scriptures are included within the paths of three types of persons, and then the second category being why students are led in stages using the three trainings. So then the first category under that is the purpose of leading students by means of the paths of three types of persons, and then the under category B is the why one guides these, and then the why has an actual reason and purpose. So Slight differences, but they're all explained as we've already gone over. And then now we're in the category of the actual way to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. And then that begins with the stage of the path shared in common with beings of small capacity. So it begins with the actual way to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity. 3 categories: training the mind in the stage of the path shared in common with beings of small capacity, training the mind in the stage of the path shared in common with beings of medium capacity, and training the mind in the stage of the path shared in common with beings of great capacity. The Kangale.
What the Laril Tangasu Sachi, what the Shit Laril Segues Marta, Lotus of the ancient data, Chenrezig data, Pan data, Maggie, and Pamba to the Pan Lunasia, Paddy, what to Sachi, you couldn't double in double English.
So this is the outline of the Lamrim, the actual outline of everything, the summary or the outline of content. In the same way, we need to learn this. In the same way, when we go to school, we would need to know the framework. The framework is another way to use it. Outline sounds very much different than framework, I think, in some ways. So we need to know the framework of the English language in order to understand English or science, or looking at medicine. Doctors have to study a large amount of the framework or the details in order to have an understanding. So the outline becomes important. The framework becomes important in all areas of learning if one wishes to understand something thoroughly.
다 네블라 중노들한테는 가서래. 네블라 중노들한테는 가서래. 제부 중노다 도모에 맞으는 발라. 로장마다 데다 도모에 맞으는 발라 로장마. 제부 준비 맞으는 발라 로장. 같이 송래도와 마돌란게 중문된다 조주에 제부 송세버서 어때? 같이 송지.
Less so. So the actual way to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity is where we are. And then there are the 3 categories. And those 3 categories interpret the beginning of a teacher's lamp for the path to enlightenment, or contain all of the content of a teacher's lamp for the path to enlightenment, as does this beginning stanza in the lamp. So it states that in the lamp we find, understand that there are persons of 3 capacities, small, medium, and great. I shall write clearly identifying their characteristics. I shall define these 3 types of persons. So the actual way to take full advantage of a life of leisure and opportunity has 3 categories, which contains the content of that stanza. First is training the mind in the stage of the path shared in common with beings of small capacity. Second, training the mind in the stage of the path shared in common with beings of medium capacity. And thirdly, training the mind in the stage of the path shared stages of the path for beings of great capacity. So these are the 3 categories.
다 제부 중어 다 제부 중어도 도모 맞으래 말로 정하더라 송래도 다때 제부 중어도 도모 맞으래 봐 마주바도 어때 사지에 송던 로데 그래서 말이야. 제부 중어 상바장 뭐지 상바도 제비세 달라 로도 세와스 로버도 세와스 사지 송래도와
Lesso.
송제
Lesso.
다 제부 준비 상바장 제부 중어들 상바가리와서는 내 송동을 가비요 말에
Lesso.
네 dendul hatami tenzo tuna gabu yoris tenzo ta tijo o tesul gabu yoris jebu chungu samba jang mo sate o ten samarba ta samba de jebi sate ta jebu chungu samba ta shene hatami tenzo tuna nya samba te lo jong jia de ta ta jebi sate karis o de jebi sate da ni sen gu ta ba de ne so o te da bi je tela lobato baseo loto jimudo sajesono.
Okay. So the first category, training the mind in the stages shared in common with persons of small capacity, or just shared with persons of small capacity, I guess is a more concise translation. There are 3 categories. The actual training of the thought for a person of small capacity, which is what is that thought? What is that mindset? Training in that mindset. What is that? This is referring to a thought that wants to be free from the lower realms of hell, hungry, ghost, and animal, and achieve rebirth in the future life as in the higher realms of the gods and humans. So this is the thought. So it is training one's mind to have that thought which is for rebirth in the higher realms. So that's the first category, and that's what that deals with. The second category is the measure of the attitude of a person of small capacity. So this person, when he or she dies, wishes to be born in the higher realms. What's the measure of that attitude? Here, the measure, when we're looking at in the three principal paths by Lama Tsongkhapa, the measure of the attitude of a person of medium capacity, it speaks of day and night seeking transcendent liberation, or day and night seeking liberation. So here, if one day and night is seeking rebirth in the higher realms, then this would be the measure of the actual determination to be free of the lower realms, if you will, in that case. So the measure of the attitude, and then clearing up misconceptions concerning the attitude of a person of small capacity, and then later on we get into these refutations of wrong ideas about that person of small capacity.
Jiden de Gaza Jiden Shema Tony Lochebas, Jiden Shema Tony Lochebas to Marbeta, Jabachung de Shene and Joalen Satlani Yore, Hadami, Tenzon Tunanabe, San Lu de Marbe, Jiden Shema Tony Lochebas, Lochebatan, Jiden Shema de Tautembas, Jiden Shema de Tautembas, da Ulma, John Rutan, and the Mogajum Sutin to Ulma Leon. Tautemba, Chebachung, Chebachung, the new Ladla, Conjusion like Chosun Rukune, Magajum Sutin Kantuchun, Dibal Shanazi at Marba, what the Tausa daughter in Uluma Legadua.
So here, the next is the subcategories again of the first category. If you're following it in the text, it makes sense, so it's necessary really to do so in order to follow this without me just referring back. So the developing, the actual training of a thought for a person of small capacity, there are two divisions. Developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives, and then secondly, relying on the means for achieving happiness in the next life. So here, this developing a state of mind. So first we're establishing future lives. So future lives, when we're establishing that, then we're looking at past lives, and then looking at future lives. So we then have to establish, yes, there is the existence of beginningless previous lives, and establish endless future, and understanding that there are only the Yilu Rinpoche, Yilu, the Koromayimbi. Okay. Okay. Remainder.
CBC Nagi Legend Penny Mind, Haji Shiva Haji Dajumbo, Yomobu Take, and the Kuyu Pombo
Lessa.
and the Kushirota. Kushin Dula, and the Joalang and the Joalang Mari, Quapany later yours, in a later, and the Haji Shishin, the Japons in base. CBC Nagi Legend Penny Mind, Haji Shiva Haji Shishin, the Japons in base, CBS. What the Kudrota? That Haji Dajumba, Yomosa can Kuyu Pombo Lama, the Chibi, Tim Dajumba Juro. The Shigrota. Send the local language, Shidig Bachatan, and then Same Jelila, then Luigi languages, what the Yilu,
mental body.
Water, they are just share your Sanji Gumatu to Korean.
Then the Dajumba, the Pombo, Koi Pombo Yure, Gangan Yene, the Ducha Yomari, Dain Sunsan, Jewa Shema, the Kora Lemba Yomari. Okay. Then
Tenji Shechen, Nyomu Pongsin Beja.
Ale, Lenchi Shechen, Ale, the Nyomo Mena, then Koi J Tugama.
Jordan Tenji Shechen Nisang.
Less so.
But the Hajida Jumba, Jacoal Jagi, Tenji Shechen Song Mothers.
Less so.
Nyomu Pongsin Beja.
Less so. Then a Konsu Tarpa, Yomare. Tarpa?
Taba Tusa. Taba Tusa.
Okay.
Jawajin
Okay, then a Sanje Yilu Yimba, Yurube.
Sanji Yule is a good.
Okay, Tuchin. Okay. So I just want to make sure when I'm translating something, I know what I'm speaking of, so I'm translating it into meaning properly. Words can just not be meaningful if I don't have the meaning behind them. So here we have developing a state of mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives. So in the future lives, there are only the possibilities of the types of birth are the birth within cyclic existence and then birth of a mental body. So the mental body would be a foe destroyer with remainder. A foe destroyer a Hinayana foe destroyer that takes on this mental body because the obstructions to the Shiji Pong Matson Gangasena Yiluyir. Shiji
Nyomu Ponsabari, Nyomu Bacha Poyo Marota, and the Chinda Pejin, Natuluju Mushi Marva, and then Gaza Mangijibu Dachum Marva, and the Ama. Nyomu Ponsarota, Ama Shanshu is Kazutar Mijil Jane, and Kumuteme and Moshi Tedu Ama Tungo Maris, Kawaji. Sanjil Tedu, Sanji go teaches us. What the Machema the Karidi was, Shidik tears, Nyomu Bacha tears.
So, this mental body, what we're talking about, this mental body that we're speaking of, the Hinayana foe destroyer's mental body, has obstructions, and those obstructions are obstructions to omniscience. So it doesn't allow him or her to be completely omniscient. And there's the story of Mugiputra, who was and Mugiputra and went to Shariputra. So Mugiputra wanted to know where his mother had been born. And because he was a Hinayana foe destroyer and had abandoned the afflictions, he was at the state of foe destroyer or liberation, but unable to see where his mother had been born because of those obstructions still in the mental continuum, because of the imprints of the actual affliction. So when we're speaking of births, there's birth in cyclic existence, and then birth with this mental body. And then when we say, is this mental body a birth in cyclic existence, the answer is no, because there's no attachment. Because there's no attachment in this foe destroyer with remainder at that time when they still have the aggregates that are cyclical aggregates. At that point, there's a foe destroyer with remainder. When they pass from that state, there's no longer attachment. So he or she is no longer in cyclic existence and is liberated, but does have obstructions because has the imprints of the afflictions which are obstructions to omniscience. So there are these two possibilities. So if we're looking at what we're speaking of in this case, we're speaking of developing a state of mind that wishes for higher realm rebirth within cyclic existence. So if we're speaking of just that word birth, and we can all look further into what this all really means, but this mental body that's created has this remainder of an obstruction to omniscience because the afflictive obstructions have been eradicated. And in order, if we look at it in debate terms, we'd say that the birth of a foe destroyer with remainders, future birth, is not a birth in cyclic existence because it doesn't have the cooperative condition combined with the cooperative condition of attachment combined with the karma in order to produce a rebirth in cyclic existence. So the cooperative condition, so the karma is there, but the cooperative condition for that rebirth isn't there, and that cooperative condition being attachment. So there have to be karma and afflictions present when we're looking at origin of suffering, there have to be karma and afflictions present for the arisal of a cyclic rebirth. And in the case of a foe destroyer with remainder, there's no longer those afflictions, so there can't be an arisal of a rebirth in cyclic existence. So this is the two births. So here, this is speaking specifically of birth within cyclic existence, not of a foe destroyer's light mental body. And they're seeking diligently for the sake of, what is the state of mind? The state of mind that wishes to achieve rebirth in the higher realms of the gods and the humans and abandon rebirth in the lower realms. So the next is relying on the means for achieving that happiness. This is referring to the method that one utilizes in order to achieve happiness. So what is the cause of happiness? Happiness here referring to rebirth in the higher realms. And then the cause becomes the practices of going for refuge in the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The ethics, which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, and acknowledging one's downfalls if he or she is engaged in negativity. So these are the means or method for achieving that happiness. Oh, less so. Okay, so here, by learning the means here for achieving happiness, happiness, rebirth in the higher realm, so the causes for that, going for refuge in the three jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, engaging in ethical behavior which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, and acknowledging one's downfalls. By studying what this means, this word means method, or which means method, which is referring to causes, then one can look at any other text and see what method is being spoken of at that time by learning it very clearly, because in this text we go over ethics, we go over the three jewels, we go over acknowledging one's downfalls or confession. So we have a thorough understanding of the means for achieving happiness, and then we ourselves are beginning to understand and learn these things, and by having them on the computer, we're helping others to do so. So by practicing these things, we ourselves will be led to a sublime state, or the higher realms, as it speaks of later in the text, and we will lead others there. And by having this on the computer, by allowing others to see the teachings, we're leading others there by allowing them to participate in this means for achieving liberation. So we'll so Gari cheaper. So there's our teachings, and then there's the Dalai Lama's teachings online, and then we can look at all these teachings and compare them and say which is the word better is a little loaded, but just saying, oh, what does this say? What does that say? And looking what's the word better was kind of used, but what's better? Looking at the Dalai Lama's explanation or looking at this explanation. Comparing like comparative. And scholars will be able to look and see, where is there a slight error? Where is this slight error? Is there a slight miscommunication? And then later they'll say, no, this is wrong, or you shouldn't. This isn't okay, or that's not okay. But if they say that, that's good. So saying that is good in terms of it needs to be right. Just to make sure we're clear.
What they have to do, Lojong Sabbath chicken to what the Jangon Sunju to Nakan Jachavris.
So for those who are new, the Dalai Lama's teachings are like the sky.
Jachavris. And
Huge.
the Koma Tubaina, Nasun New Shibaina, the Chichina Pensigris.
So we go through things very little, piece by piece, so it will hopefully be of benefit. Whereas the Dalai Lama's teaching is vast as the sky itself, and we're going through little bits and pieces, so hopefully it'll be beneficial.
No, Chuchun, Jangon Sunju Jachav Shetu Mariste. And then also do the Shibaina, Chichina Pensigris.
So by so the Dalai Lama is so vast, his knowledge, his teaching is so vast. So with a small mind, we can't understand these things. But if we can look at it little by little, then we can slowly begin to understand the mass of the teaching His Holiness is giving us. So maybe it's for this, or it's for this. Less so.
What less so. That Tombutala Tombola Jeroje, Chowamata, Chowadama Gumbi Yemi, Gumbi Pen, Chowad Tembi Law, Chetabushi Jeva, Chowadama Gumbi Chusaji was Mariba, what the Tombutalta, Chowaman Nashagre, Nabishaw to Gungina, Maguna Yemi orders, Saji Trudis one, Magum Yemi, Gumbi Pen, the Saji Mariba. And then Chowa Tembi, Lucheta, and the Chowa Mataba Gonsa at the Kandej Gun waters, both the letters, the ring of what the Lega Mariba. And then Chowa Temba Gun between the Le, Zawasun, Jusen Go, Tajivasun, or the Sajin Yundua.
Jepa.
And the Jepa the Yundua.
The Yanjusuna said, Som Go.
Zawasun, Zawa, 3
Route 3.
And then Jusen Go Mariba.
The Gom Go. The Jutsen Go, 9 reasons.
Jutsen, Buddhism, Nai Buddhism.
Lesser.
Not touch it was the wool, Malay.
Lesser. So, this is how they call this. Okay, so, all right, so now we're, we went over mindfulness, developing the mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives, and then relying on the means for achieving that happiness in the next life. So developing a mind that strives diligently for the sake of future lives has 2 parts. First, first part has 2, mindfulness of death and the contemplation that you will not remain in this world long. And then the second category of contemplating what will occur in your future life. 2 possibilities of the happiness of suffering of happiness or the suffering of the 2 types of beings. So there are 2 possibilities, the higher realm rebirth or the lower realm rebirth. So going to the first section, which is the mindfulness of death, contemplating that you will not remain in this world long, this is dealing with the impermanence of death. So impermanence and death, and this has 4 categories. The faults of not cultivating the mindfulness of death. And this section has 6 points that are made, some 4. Second section, the benefits of such cultivation. We find 3 points that are made there. And then the kind of mindfulness of death you should develop. So what specific kind of mindfulness one should develop, what one should develop. And then how to cultivate the mindfulness of death. And then the section on how to contemplate the mindfulness of death, there are, hold on one second, 3 root categories. The contemplation that death is certain, the contemplation that the time of death is uncertain, the contemplation that at the time of death nothing helps except religious practice. So we have those three main categories, and then there are 9 reasons that are given, 9 categories of reason, and then 3 this tama sum tacheba don kadre. So there are 3 points. I don't know how to say it. The actual training of developing the state of mind strives diligently. So we'll get to the 3. There's the 3 that will come up. Actual way. At break, I'll look at the outline too. There's if it's there. So there are again the 3 root points, 9 reasons, and then 3 other points that are going to be made in the 4th section. So we'll get to that. We can look at the outline again, like I said. Oh, the reflecting on future life, I think it has contemplating the suffering of hell, animal, and hungry ghost. I think those are the 3. So the top, what is that called? Yeah, reflecting on what will occur in your future life. I think that's it, 3 points that are made. What will occur in the future. Yeah, I think that's correct. Lasa.
And Jebba Chung Lantu Jala Jena, Sosu Dundul Lore, Jenda Dundul Titures, Dunda the Licho Maris, what the Kazon teachings are all.
So people.
Then Neighbor the Panun Subigo Mariba, Chomataba Jamba, the Panun Suba Sanji Forest, Luna, JB. Dun Dubin, Dune, Dayu, then Chabajan to be Dun the Kona in Las, Ruki Pechi, Nando, Dejin, Dundu Jonze, Wonjang, Mokumbi Nesu, Shechewe, Tadato, Chudrubi, Coming in Lasa. Drubi Chubi, then Tunang, Chutujin to Marubane, Tadon, Chutujin to Maruba, the Nashaka Marina, or the Tanzi Junjine. Chudu Marese, Tadum Machinaba, de la Tudubina, Le Machinabi Shunzebane, Guba Tanji Gotan, Niebo, T. Niebo Jambane, Person Suba Tanji Gos, that Madaba Gumbi, Madaba Chikamare be Tanzin de, and Guba Tanji Gores, Cheganache, Dungaji Dunga, Yu Dunga, Chaban Dunga, Cheganachi. Dunga Tanji Gores, Madaba Gumba de, and Madaba Temba, the Person Suba Tanji Gores, Marga, Madaba Nashaka, Madaba Temba Ina, Tene Tendulan, Tabilan, Sanji Gumuntu Lantu Lunachine, Taba Yungre, Tendu Yungre, and the Sanji Yungres, Person Suba Yungres, Geshe Lharampa, on the Zamarba.
Okay. Decent. Okay. So now we're on page 146 into 147. Just going over again the benefits of cultivating mindfulness of death. So previously, the faults of not cultivating mindfulness of death had 6 points. Then the benefits of cultivating mindfulness of death has 2 points. 3 points. So the 3 points that are made is first that there's great meaning. It's very meaningful. So why is it very meaningful to cultivate mindfulness of death? Because then it allows one to then engage in all of the great teachings. It allows one. It turns one towards religious practice and goodness. So it's for that reason that it has great meaning. And secondly, what we've been dealing with is that it's the door to all excellence, the door into all excellent qualities. So this grasping at a permanent self, having this idea that I will not die is the gateway to all negativity. So the gateway into goodness refers to getting rid of that grasping at things as being permanent. So here, this meditation on mindfulness of death, it does that. So it says, among all reapings, the autumn harvest is supreme. Among all tracks, the track of the elephant is supreme. Among all ideas, the idea of impermanence is supreme. The idea of impermanence and death is supreme because with it you eliminate all attachment, ignorance, and pride of the three realms. So that's a quote from the final Nirvana Sutra, where he speaks of impermanence being the king of all. And right before that, it speaks of it being so meaningful, this meditation. And then it says, similarly, it is praised for being the hammer that instantly destroys all afflictions and wrongdoing, for being the gateway into the instantaneous, so the door into instantaneous achievement of all virtue and goodness and so on. And then there's the collection of indicative verses. I'll quote it quickly, the two. Understanding the body is like a clay vessel, and similarly that phenomena are like mirages. Here you destroy the demons, poisons, flower-tipped weapons, and pass beyond the sight of the Lord of Death. So this grasping at the permanence is the gateway into all of the different types of sufferings. So this meditation on death and impermanence destroys the suffering, the suffering of change, the pervasive compounded suffering. All of these types of sufferings are abandoned through meditation upon death and impermanence. So this is the excellent quality of it, or the great quality of it, that it is the gateway or the door into all that is good, the door into the higher realms of the gods and humans, the door that leads into liberation or nirvana, the door that leads to complete Buddhahood. So it's a gateway to all that is good.
Geshe Lharampa chega na chi dunga la soba ne mede ba thaje yong ares mede ba thaje yong res ane mata ba sang ta sha ba te Geshe Lharampa ne chebe chung la ane ding la chebe la wa to so lo chebe yong re de la te ne ane de lu yong re ta ba yong re ane saje yong re phasung so ba thaje Geshe Lharampa res.
So meditation upon impermanence and death gets rid of this grasping at permanence, which causes us to have the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death. And by meditating upon impermanence and death, it propels us into practicing the pathways which lead to the higher realms, the pathways which lead to liberation, and the pathways which lead to complete Buddhahood. So it's independence upon meditation on impermanence and death that we're able to achieve all of this goodness, all of these results. So this is why it says that it is the gateway to all excellence, or the gateway to all virtue and goodness, because independence upon it, one is able to achieve what the results of the paths.
어제 다때네 엔데레도 방송소바 단지 고 어때 네 방송소바 단지 고서 사지 니바드레도 다티시르 티신데 다불라 추사모 제 공주 매바 나지 냐렌 노 냐바탄 고자 인양 담 중세 장 공바샤이 준비 냐렌도 무효소 냐도 무송와 the Tota Basonto, Gulula Neba, Hintabane Jete, Gumbasha Husa, what the Lodu Sevas of the Remedy, Lodu Seva, and then Tuenchewa, Madaba Gumbi Pen de la Tuenchewa, Pansus of Tanjico, Lodu Sevas of the Rendo, Lodu the Carriersina, and then Madaba Guya and the Gunshada Jam against Guyaris. 네 마도 문자 영상주 센터 도수공 마다바 공고 말레스 안는 마다바 게도 공안도 봐요 이나 총제공 되네 공고 말레스 어때 도바데 인사로 어떤데서는 디고 말레스 디시르 데다보 추사모 예 공주 매바 나지 냐래 논 하바 단스 도바지제 Gonja yin tambu chungse sang gongwa shayi. Junbi nyala to meyo so nyato mozon was. Jundu mataba gongo mares. What is ungo to santan juyo mares. Mataba gombe londe tota bason to golo la ngaba nyin taba ne jete gomba shawos. Ta mataba gombe lote tota bason taba na temel ne töda rajeni marbe ne tö le tota bason to mataba gomba kechivre rajela ya tota bason to mataba gomba kechivre ne sanje gomba bechen rabe injilota tota bason to golo la ngaba nyin taba ne jete gomba shawos.
Listen.
What is a marban? I should have Mata Judu Nana, Tomate, Mataba Sunday, the Marbe. Mata Dung, Tonda Meje, Mataba Thomas Mundua.
Listen.
Jigan Chudu, Lambache Jere, Logan on the Chud Twenty Lure, and then the Jigan on the Chu Mataba Dujeres. They two images in Karasana and the council in the Batan, Najeta Mariba Tanche, Selo. Teji to Numo, the new Numo Tanche Jumbi. 토한다 그래서 맞아. 어떤 양안인데 또 당 총고론이 당고.
So the third point that's made, so the first point that's made is establishing the great meaning of meditation on death and impermanence. The second point is that establishing that all good qualities arise from this meditation on death and impermanence. It's the gateway to all excellent and goodness, all good qualities. And the third is dispelling misconceptions or getting rid of wrong ideas. So here, Rinpoche, the NGK Kanga Lago Gangisana the Gatsu the Kashe Chiran. Okay, so now here we get to the dispelling misconceptions. I asked Rinpoche if I should reread parts, and Rinpoche said we already went over it. So Rinpoche skipped, so I just wanted to make sure he wanted me to skip because sometimes he doesn't. So I'm skipping down. So the third point we find in here, that therefore the thought that you will not die is the source of all deterioration, and the remedy for this is mindfulness of death, the source of all that is excellent. Consequently, you should not think that this is a practice for those who do not have some other profound teaching to cultivate in meditation. Nor should you think that although this is something worthy of meditation, you should cultivate it just a little at the beginning of the session, because it's not suitable for continuous practice. Rather, be certain from the depths of your heart that it is necessary in the beginning, middle, and end, and then cultivate it in meditation. So here, the misconception is that meditation upon impermanence is only important initially, that it isn't important throughout all levels of practice, and then one cultivates bodhicitta, or cultivates a topic such as bodhicitta, or the mind that aspires to enlightenment, that this becomes more profound than meditation upon impermanence, so we can kind of discard, and it becomes less important. So this is saying that meditation upon impermanence is important at the beginning, middle, and end. So in the Hinayana vehicle, we have the Nyentu and Ranjel, the hearers and solitary realizers. So it's important at the beginning. Meditation upon death and impermanence is important at the beginning, the middle, and the end. And then for the Bodhisattvayana, the Mahayana practitioners, meditation upon death and impermanence is important at the beginning, in the middle, and the end. So it has to permeate it, be part of all practices at all times. And it's a wrong idea to think that this meditation upon death and impermanence is just an initial starter meditation, or a meditation to do when there's not something more profound. So this is something that is always perpetually, if you will, necessary. Always necessary, perpetually necessary. So it says that it is necessary from the beginning, middle, and the end, and then cultivate it in meditation once you realize that it's important at the beginning, the middle, and the end. And it says that up here we find the quote from the Nirvana Sutra where it says, of all the harvests, fall harvest is best. Of all the footprints, the elephant footprint is the best. And of all the practices, the practice of death and permanence is the best, because it destroys all the attachment, ignorance, and pride of the three realms. So it's like the hammer that destroys all of the afflictions and the wrongdoing. So this is why it's stated that meditation upon death and impermanence is necessary at the beginning, the middle, and the end for all practitioners at all levels.
어제 당아도 가서 그래. 이제 Jiden Shema, Duani, Dudu Samba, Tambula Je, Chawadama Magumbi Yemi, Saji to Saji, Chawadama Gumbi Pen Sun Saji.
Lesser.
Da Ludu Sewa Tsarwa.
Lesser.
Da Sumba, Chawadambi, Lucha Tabashi Cheba, so what the Marva. Sumba Chawadambi, Lucha, and then Chawamadava Gumulot Kaneji Gungures, Tribaina, that day Dunda and Shebaina, da Dunda ni Marvini Sonduani.
Okay.
Da Jibu Chung Chu and Ding Chu the Jimmy Chu and Mashibaje. On the Nashesuna or Napama, Pama Lanere, Pinja to Lanere, Trubul Hanere, Najala Buddha Yore, or the Sukun of the Tendabe, San Lute, Chawatamba Gumbi Chawatan, Gunchu Temares. On a Karabungurusana or the Nashesuna. And Shesuna and then go up to Mardo and Umare and then Diba Momosasare, non as one chicken, what the Tabi Chawamataba Togun Ulma Lelegua, Dominido, Chow Gumulu de la Tanga to choose on the Mabache, and then social Chabi Cheche, and then Shigamarina with Tanzi Tionke. Then Mashesuna, Danye, near the tower, Gasure, near J, Lulonju, Tangi the Tendegreen of Hinojun was scared. What the Gonsu, Chogonsu de Mares, and Mashesuna, and just at the Dendutanganima du Mare, and then just Muna, Dungan over there, Dungan to Jukanaka, the Wagi. And then the Walatin Dendul Chigre and the Wagi Jukarime. Then the Pavi Demo, and then the Kunu Pavi Demo, or to the ladies of Marabel. Dungan to the Jukola Tenshons and the Lady Kunu to Remo Kunju. What Tendul Lojan Jane, the Sumabishene, or Tanga Shesuna, what the Yungurin of it, Chow Matava Kunju, what the Gungus.
Bless her. The Tambo.
They will take
Tambo Dang Nipa, the Sengare.
Tambo Tanga to sugar next machine and ashes one, then Shina Roda. Or the Nashir in Matabagune and Sang Mazobaja Marve, Hamashea, Pinjashia, Tobashesuna, Shibu Tonsiba to Shibu Moyo. Or then I show Mataba Conju Tana de Mares.
The Mare, okay. The name Nipa.
Lendis on Tana.
Then.
And the Jugoalat and Zebudoy, Dunella Diba, and the Jugoalat and Zebudoy, what the Tabines Vishine, or Nashasuna, Nasmul Jigre, Dungan Diba Musas.
Tuchena.
What the and then go on through your mare, or Nashasuna, and they have Mare, what to go worse. Mataba Conjut.
So now the next part is the kind of mindfulness of death that you should develop. So this is the next, the type of mindfulness of death. So here, this is speaking of, there are 2 points that are going to be made. And the first point that's going to be made is that when one realizes that he or she is going to die, there becomes this fear that instantaneously comes up, that one will be separated from one's loved ones, one will be separated from one's friends, one's relatives. Everything one possesses, all of our enjoyments, all of our things will be taken from us. We will be separated from all of these things. So when we think of dying, this is what arises. And this is not right. This is not the right meditation upon impermanence and death. So the point that's being made here is that thinking about it and then thinking about what we're going to lose and the friends being separated isn't the appropriate, that fear isn't the appropriate fear that we should be cultivating. The fear is relative to the origin of suffering. We should recognize that there is 2 things that cause the suffering in our future lives. That's karma and the affliction. So this karma and afflictions are what are the origin or cause of our suffering in our future lives. So when we're meditating upon impermanence and death, we begin to think about our future lives and recognize that there are 2 possibilities. We can be reborn in the lower realms of the hell realm, hungry ghost and animals, or we can be reborn in the higher realms of the gods, gods, humans, and demigods, and so forth. Or we can be free from cyclic existence, achieve liberation, or complete Buddhahood. But in this case, we're within the small scope, so we have two possibilities after we have died: the lower realms or the higher realms. And then we begin to think of, in this life, we do not want suffering, we want happiness. How do we cultivate happiness in our future lives? And what is happiness? And in this case, happiness becomes rebirth into the higher realms. And happiness and suffering are both results, so there must be a cause for happiness. There must be a cause for the suffering. What is the origin? So then we begin to contemplate what these things are, and then recognize that in dependence upon our misdeeds, we will experience suffering. In dependence upon virtue, we experience happiness of the higher realms. So this, when we're speaking of the contemplation of impermanence and death, is the appropriate thing to think about. Have we engaged in virtue? Have we engaged in non-virtue? These are the appropriate topics, not when I die I'll be separated from my friends and I won't have my things, I won't have my enjoyments. That is not what the meditation upon death is. So it says the kind of mindfulness of death you should develop. The first point is it isn't the kind that worries about losing one's possessions and loved ones. So this is the first point that's made. It is guiding one to recognize the origin of suffering, karma, and afflictions, and then the origin of happiness being virtue, and then driving one towards that because of a mindfulness of death and recognition of future life's experiences.
어떤데 그 최근에 주던 살만 매바지도 어떻게 신앙나 마다바던 temba이나 네 팬도요 말이스 제사 신제들라 셔르그레스 마시베 되는 소주요 말이 신데 그래 네 어디 셔와도 가도와요 말이스 주니고 제사 조들 셔그레스 말이베
So this fear doesn't stop death. Just being scared alone doesn't stop death. So just being afraid that one is going to die isn't something that, at the time, isn't something that stops death. Katugumare isn't able to stop death.
다시 실수나 동해 용거래 대화 용거래 대화가 주던 동해 주선 뭐 안에 마다바 공부이나 대 안에 동해 봉하게 터지지는 동해 까도 그래서 저 마다바 가야가 터지지는 까도 그래서 제다가 뒤좀 봐 치면시 있는 돌아 치도 좋아 매비셔 제 뒤지 좀봐 주규연도 시비 송비에서 저 봉하게 터진 가서 년래지나 최근에 주시나 저한테 가야게 터지지 도로다 도그래 송래다
scared chewa katu
chewa 가야겠다 지상주 생고야 당 어떤 전에 다주고 공투야 어떤 랑공투야로 예마 체야 매버서 도그러다 더시지야 요래서 최근에 되는 마시나 그 신앙나는 고바요 말았어 저원 가도 말았어 제사 조글 시그스 어디 온데 레고도
the longa garne
롱다 올 레고도
okay
네 아마라 보고 뒤에 네마치라서 바바 주로 바바 다가는 사나 바바 셔다 아마 바바 my
grandfather
mother he the rag down he
fell off a mountain
then 아마무르다 보고 뒤에 가가무르다 아마무르 보고 가가무르다 너 어디 출근해서 가시오 뭐 어디 나오서 되지로다
So I remember when my grandfather died, he fell off a rock or hit his fell off a rock and hit his head and died, my grandfather. And I remember the time when my mother began to cry, and then we all, 7 children, began to cry with her as a spontaneous reaction, because we didn't really understand the nature of impermanence and death. And there's later on, there's a quote that says that once one understands the nature of impermanence and death, this fear subsides because one then knows the practice that leads to pathways that lead to the higher realms, and engages in the practices such as bodhicitta, and there's a means to some other achievement beyond. So then this fear subsides. So Rinpoche quoted, I think it, though you hold fast, you cannot stay. What benefit is there in being frightened and scared of what cannot be changed? So it's quote from the Garland of Birth story. So Rinpoche said, we'll get into that later. He began to quote it. I asked him where the quote was. He said in the book, so I just found it. And I believe that's what Rinpoche quoted. If I'm wrong, I apologize. The fear of death can be eradicated by this meditation on impermanence and death. So the first point that's made is that this fear is caused by this strong attachment and isn't something that is helpful. Meditating upon the causes of happiness, so one begins to fear the suffering of the lower realms and wish to have a happiness in the future realms. But there is a means or a practice that will allow one to achieve happiness. So there is this fear isn't founded, really, because there is a means to practicing. So then this meditation upon impermanence and death shouldn't make one be scared. It should then turn one to the practices which lead to happiness and the means of abandoning suffering, which is abandoning negativities, abandoning misdeeds. Rinpoche, the Jutsu Je Dan Karma. So we're going to take a
le lamba tanjis le da nyomo bo ke ne le lamba chawa lamba tanje ngaba chawa le mande bes le da nyomo ke chawa lamba tanje de ngaba shegu des ma shiba de ya yo mares ji jin je ga shi sa wo to so yin je ro ta le da nyomo bo ke le lamba tanje ngaba chawa le mande be tala taba che jang reji ga menu mensa tel shinaya ane le dan nyomo mo ge cha ta shen ji de la ane nge ba shen de ka shwa de ka tu mares ga menu mes jan ji de shemi tu ngandu jungo ba ta ngo tu dang le ji ju ma ru bar chawala jiba sha de sa tela te taba sana tada rutu yebe chekar mataba sha yuela sa ta chawa mataba gongsu ndere songdo wen jang jiden shimi dun ngandu tang ngandu yu jungo ba ta ndene dunga papi denbo, ndene kunju papi denbo. Kunju denba tala, ane nga songu ju le dan nyomo bu kunju, dendu yu jo le dan nyomo bu kunju, wata songu nga su kunga she, ane debo dendu dan ngandu tuzu yabu sheba che, ane wata she sona dunga yungre nyabe, taba chegi ina, ane shega la mataba yungres. Nga janji den shemi tun, ngandu yu ju goba tang, ngandu yu ju goba ta, nga son marbe lo rang, rwa? Ote yu jute, kanto, ta jo le jile naba son, nga ke naba je, ije naba son tusu marbe, deba magawa jute zo, nga son jo marbe, owa tasu chetu, magi chulung suti kanto chetu son ba ina, ngandu yu jute ngodu marbe. Ane son mato na deba la shadang che ya, goba tans, ta nga tu ta nga le, nga tu ke jute ta chutin, leji deba bombi chutin, nga ke deba bombi chutin, iji deba bombi chutin, chetin chungzong teke, hatang hama yin tang, mali che te marbe. Nga tu ta nga le che, nga le ke jute ta, nga le la taba tangche cheba, ni, taba toje ke jute laba song, chutin chi laba, 돈이 라미비 땡은지 라바 안에 쉐러지 라바 손 공부이나 아니 제마 병에 보면 타발로 이제로다 내레지 조 마루바 초알은 집어서 다들 처음부터 공부하도 어떤 공부했어 장 지대 심이 된 나루 주고 봤다 안에 나루 주는 게 보여 말에 안에 뭐도 내레지 조 안에 도요 말에 마루방아 셔스구나 안에 손을 제거래 안에 동행 용거래서 집어를 샤테에서 처음부터 잡아지야도 어떤 공부했어 달라네 대타바서나 다다 루드예베 체가 마타바샤 샤라 유라사 달라서 어때다비네 주시네 초월 잡아요긴데 타바서나서 아네 타바서나 다다 루드예베스 내가 손을 맞아 루드거로다 디 먹이 좀 쓰진 가도 저도 건조 손을 쪄선도나 안 디발을 샤다 제바 있는 손도 저와도 가도 그러다. 그래도 예배 체크만 잡아 용거를 체크하면데 안에 잡아 용거만 했다. 최바로 체크하면도 그와 용거를 최안가 담에 제겐지 체크하면도 왔다. 그래서 당가 뢰 아버지 내그리냐 그와 용거를 저 가와다 안에 디 가르쳐 군이 써야죠 말이야.
가비. Then the long yearbe. Ngangisana guy kabir the jerap long yearbe. Jerap long.
다들다 최바 아버지나 시간을 자고 말했어. 가본 용거랬어. 디지나 자고 말했어. 최바 담아지나 줘봐 용거 말했어. 다음에 메시지를 가도 주도 춘 제바이 다시는 다 줘봐 매선 줘봐 매봐 용거랬어. 어떤 순이서 말이야.
니 때네
달라 대 잡아서나스 대답이네 레전드다 겨울도 저기네 주 시비고네 어떤 하셔서는 내 손을 찍으려냐 잡아되나 아니 내 손도 제하게 줘도 가도 그랬어 다다 내 손도 줘도 가봐도 루도 예배 체가 맞아봐 샤유라스 체가 라면도 줘봐라지나 가봐 용거래 줘반디나 안에 맞아봐 메로 안 주바 담아지나 줘봐 매봐 용거레스 what is it tell te trabasana tada rutu yebe cheka mataba shayuelasa tada maduna shikole matabata chebardo nganru tonyu jine chi chen jebe dongwa jote sa an chawal traba je tene ane ngasong jo kanto chuto pon ane dendu jo kanto chuto maruba ina ane shakala madal tene joba yungo se marbe jebe dongwa jote chero kmo dongdo chero leben bawu marbe ayandewa tuken ko leben bawu injero ta leben
long nipa
wade chero sojiba injere chero le radu dinchang ne menu radu dinchang ne menu kan la chusu moronwa jishin dangwa sheba yi tala phamba jishus chugi nesu ma sheba je ane nye tang ane chubola chaba tenbe nga tada ta tegre nyabe chaba jeba tenda yo martel ka tuwa yo maris le tang nyuma bongi chasa shinche tila yenji meji shinagaris wate tamate ka kondare ndwa 다 제르메지 담을 몸소는 다 수송도스나 네 제자베드네 땡주노로레 네가사 르변 바웨 제로 소주발이 송도스 제로레
니차 the Jerab the Arya Deva long
아야도에
Nipa the long year long chi Jerab
담be 제로레도
Nipa jipcha
no 제로 레 라도 딘장 네 메뉴스 라도 딘장 and the chicken is too much. I been Jata, Pamata, Jalata to Tegra in Yabe, Shinal on the Petua Maricivata, later Numo, Cheta Shinchela, never the Shindig, Katu Mares.
Okay.
Kala Juice of Moronwa, Jishin, Nambara Shebai, Telepamba Jishusa. What did I be the Nakashin to Mashibachi, the Pamata Pinja to got the Ted again Yabe, and the Jabashin at the name Tendayo Mapetu, Petu Mares. Theatre and Jide Chuni Latana, Theatre and Jide Chuni Latana. Mena Debashibin Jobanjuro, Mena Debashibin Jobanjuro. Theatre Jide Chuni Sana. Jiden Chuni Sana Natsuka Sabure. Jidan Chuni la Rabi Chuni dan Chai Chuni Jayoro. Tangasun Jiden to situation said Marbe, me situation, being situation, later Numo Chi, being situation, Cheta Shinchitla, and Sugaris.
Lesser.
Being situation is
Lesser.
Chuni said what things are.
Lesser.
Theatre Jiden Chuni la Tanas. Mana Deba Shebin Jobajos, Jedi Shunil Dana, and Mana and Casabure. That Nazungu Jodan and Caso Dendri Jo, the shaking to the Injera.
Data
Jedi Chuni Dana, Mana Deba Shebin Jobajorosa, what the Injera. Gay legend, Gay legend, Leva Yomajes. Shimitsala Dunga, John to Toes and John to Two, Chawaju, Jibi, Mombajorosa.
Ale Barche.
Teda Jiden Chuni Latana, Mana, Debashib, Jobanjoro. Debasasa do Shun Joba Yungres, Jobanjoro. Gay legend, Leba. Yomajes, and the Gawanza Mare, Deba Mombasacres, and what the Shakalamatu, what did that not Debi Ogi, Nehultin, Dungan Yungurina, Tabat Yungres, Shemi Sella, Dungan Jon to Tosa, Shemi Selatin, Dungan Yungurina to Watchers, Tuba, Chewanju, Trabe, Mombaju, Chewanju, what the Draben Jiban Joseph, Chomatabatan said, Chot was Tampa Nigitan wood or something, Samarba. JB Mombaju, Conla Daki, then Choanju, JB Mombaju, Chikalamatan, Jobayun with a mobile wood is saying. Canle Dane, Yine, Jonjoa, Canle Dane, Yila, Jonjoa. Teni Dagi Sheba Yomadensa. Kale Dagi Yine Jonjoas. Tag Natsu Sen Jobajagi, Tenasu Lejo, Toma Maban Tati Pato, Lejo Su Jeba Maziba, Mazamba Sheba, Jun Tama, said to Diba Mago, Chudan Sama and Nala Soba, Momosa Yuares, and Nasu the Tango Mares. Kale Dagi Yin Jonjoa. Joban Jojiji and Deba Mago, Jotan Sama, Bangala Subatan, Toma Maban, Sa Tabarete, Nasu the Tango Mares. The new Dagi Sheba Yomadens.
Okay.
Kabi Legend Rodo, Congress, Chula, Nana Chi, Sushi Jisa. And Kabi Lel, then the Kabi Lela Rodo. Tadi consume just on the Gune and Magujum Suti Contu Dibala Shana Shiala Subi, Kabi Chudel Combashina, Chula Nena, Che Sushis, and the Chula Negi and the Shakalam Jigamaris, Gabuyungris, so the Trago Maris, Tamale, Joba Yungaris, all the things some Che Sushi, Che Sombatansa, there what Tom Tiju.
So now we're in number 3, page 147. The kind of mindfulness of death you should develop. There's an incredible amount of information I have to convey, so just bear with me here. I think everyone knows that. For those who have not practiced the path at all, the fear of death manifests itself as the worry that they will be separate from their relatives and so forth. So one will be separated from one's loved ones, from one's enjoyments, from one's things. One will be separated. So this, for those who haven't practiced the path at all, that's the kind of fear that arises, the fear of losing one's loved ones and things. This fear is caused by their strong attachment. Therefore, do not develop this here. So this is not the appropriate meditation upon impermanence and death. This isn't what one is thinking about and the purpose of it. This is attachment. So here it says, what then should you develop? Certainly, nothing of your body, which you appropriated through karma and afflictions, shall survive death. So this body that we've been forced into, these aggregates we've been forced into by our karma and our afflictions, isn't going to survive our death. We will not bring this body with us. We will not bring our friends with us. We will not bring our things with us. None of these things will survive our death. This may frighten you, yet for the time being you can't stop it. So of what benefit is this fear if this is irreversible? This death cannot be stopped. So however, you should fear death if you have not secured your welfare in future lives by putting an end to the causes of miserable rebirths and establishing the causes of high status and certain goodness. So one should be fearful of not having utilized this basis for something of purpose. One should be fearful if one hasn't created the causes for rebirth into the higher realms of the gods and the humans that abandon the lower realms, which are engaging in ethics, which abandons the 10 non-virtuous activities, acknowledging one's downfalls if he or she is engaged in them, and going for refuge to the 3 jewels of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The negativities which are to be abandoned are the 3 negativities of the body, the 4 negativities of the speech, and the 3 negativities of the mind. And through engaging in the ethics which abandons these negativities, one is able to couple that with refuge. And if one wavers, acknowledge that downfall, and then by doing so achieve rebirth in the higher realms and abandon lower realm rebirth. So here, one should be scared if he or she hasn't at least developed these causes for a higher realm rebirth, which is high status. Certain goodness is referring to liberation and complete Buddhahood, 2 categories. Liberation is brought about by the 3 highest higher trainings of ethics, concentration, and wisdom. So this human basis is suitable to practice Dharma with, to engage in the religious practices which lead to high status, and then certain goodness being liberation and Buddhahood gained by practicing the higher trainings and then coupling them at the highest level with bodhicitta to achieve Buddhahood. So these are the 2 categories of certain goodness. So that is what one should fear, not having cultivated these pathways, these causes. If you consider your fear about this, it is within your power not to be frightened at the moment of death, because there are things you can do to secure your future welfare. So those who have engaged in practices, those who go to religion, those who engage in the practices of going for refuge, engaging in ethical behavior which abandons negativity, and acknowledging one's downfalls, those who engage in religious practices have no fear at the time of death because of knowing that the causes for high status and certain goodness have been created in that lifetime. It has not been underutilized. It's been used for purpose. So there isn't any reason to be frightened, because there is something to do about it. One can secure one's welfare. There is a practice. There is a means to achieving transcendence, whether it's in the higher realms of high status or certain goodness of a final liberation in Buddhahood. If you do not act on these things, you will be tormented by regret at the time of death. In general, fearing that you will not be liberated from cyclic existence, and in particular that you will fall to a miserable realm. So there'll be a general regret that one didn't achieve liberation, that one didn't get rid of cyclic existence, and then particularly a fear of the lower realms, fearing hell, hungry ghost, and the animal realms. So this will take over if one hasn't applied a method or a means or a cause to achieving the antithesis of the miserable realms and the antithesis of samsara at a gross level, which is liberation or higher realm rebirth. So then there's a quote from the Jerup, from the Garland of Birth Stories, which is the previous life stories of the Buddha when he was a bodhisattva. So, hold on. Where are we? Okay, so here we go. Though you hold fast, you cannot stay. What benefit is there in being frightened and scared of what cannot be changed? So no matter what one does, one can cling to this life, but everyone will die. There is nothing that can be changed about that. It says, why be scared then if it's something that can't be changed? Or when we're all going to die. We've seen all of these examples of beings who have passed. Thus, when you analyze the nature of the world, there is a coarse nature and then the subtle nature of the world. So there are these two things. Humans are regretful at death because they have sinned and have not brought forth virtuous actions. They worry about sufferings to come in their future lives, and fear of dying clouds their mind. So this fear of dying clouds one's mind because one recognizes that when we look at the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth of origin, what causes that suffering, the truth of origin has two categories, the karma and the affliction. So if one has sinned, the truth of origin is present, will give rise to a cyclical rebirth. And it says because one not only has engaged in misdeeds or sinned continuously, but he or she has not brought forth virtuous actions. So there has been, one has engaged in misdeeds, but not engaged in virtue very much. So there is this regret in the mind because the origin of suffering is karma and the afflictions, and one is more familiar with this. So it says when you analyze the nature of the world, again, coarse and subtle nature of the world, humans are regretful of death because they have sinned and I don't believe, and I could, if I'm wrong, I apologize, the coarse and subtle nature of the world wasn't explained. I will ask Rinpoche after this, though. And have not brought forth virtuous actions. So this becomes a clouding of the mind. This fear of not having done, not utilized this basis, clouds the mind at the time of death. It says, however, I do not know of anything I have done that would be make me regretful. That would make me regretful. So it should. I don't know of anything that I've done that would make me more regretful than not having accustomed myself to virtuous actions. Why should anyone who abides in the teaching fear death? So the only thing to regret is having not engaged in religious practices of the small, medium, and great pathways. If someone has engaged in religious practice, there's no reason to have any fear of death. So here, we've been more accustomed to non-virtue, more accustomed to the 5 irreversible actions and the 5 hell deeds, the 10 non-virtuous actions. These are the misdeeds that we've been more accustomed to. And they're opposites. The virtuous activities we have engaged in very little of. So this is necessarily going to give rise to negative rebirths. And those who engage in Dharma practices don't fear this because the result does not arise because the causes aren't present. The causes for the opposites of those suffering are present because the practices are engaged in which serve as opponents to what one fears, and that's the suffering of the lower realms, which aren't experienced because one is a religious practitioner. So there's no fear for a religious practitioner. Then the ngo the tramo dan rapa chu lapson donda lasun the jite ngo the ngo tramo dan rapa the chu the donda lasun
jite chuni se trova
the chu tramo dan rapa the donda lasun
jite chuni se da jite chuni se da ngaso Medan has a Lama in the what Jiten Basana
Jikten.
Tolama took Sijin Kolo Jiten Bandajmarbe.
Tonlama, okay. Okay.
And then Lanju Jina Tolan Julani,
Less so.
and the Majuba Kolo Jiten Baji. Jiten and Devasana Tolan Golam Mulula, or to the Jiten Deva in Jero. Jiten Chunis, what in Marbe. Tangazo Medan to Rutan to Galo, just as Jingela Shinagro. Then Jiten by Chunis, Jiten by being situation.
Less so.
Chunis situation.
Then they Rapa dan Tramo Laos, Nama Laosun. They rap.
Rabasni,
Okay,
Chini did like Chini Jinem Chini, Chinis Chamus Niloro. And the Sherani, but the Chutan Mem son here, what the Tony Tamaro. Tanga to Netu May I chant about it, may I chant about
Fire.
What the Mayshun is.
Oh,
less so. The choose.
Less so.
Then there's Chukal natural
Less so.
situation.
Less so.
What the Chunis.
So going back to
just as in it, less sugars.
Less so.
Chunis, being Chunis.
Less so. So the nature of the world here, when we're looking at nature, that word can have subtle and coarse meanings. So the nature of beings, you see, the nature of the world, humans, so the nature of the world, the beings who abide in the world will die, will pass. So that's the nature of cyclic existence. This word world is jikdenba in Tibetan. And the worldly being is qualified as one who has not reached the path of seeing yet. So a being on the path of accumulation, the being on the path of preparation, or one who hasn't even entered the path below those would be considered a worldly being. So at the path of seeing, that is when one moves from worldly to unworldly. So a worldly being is one like that. So it says when you analyze the nature of the world, humans are regretful at death because they have sinned. So the nature of the world, again, we'll have to see how it could be reinterpreted or something, but I think it's clear here. But the humans are and worldly. There's some connection to this that I'd have to rework or look at, but it's referring to those beings who have not reached the path of seeing. That's a worldly being, and the nature of beings is that they are die. Humans, gods, etc. They die and then are reborn into cyclic existence. So when we're speaking of subtle and coarse, just that they die is their subtle nature of a being's existence. But the fact that they die is the coarse nature of the being's existence. But the lack of true establishment of that is the subtle nature of that being's existence. The lack of true establishment of that death is the subtle nature of that being's existence. So when we look at the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, where we see there's no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, the nature of phenomena here we're looking at, the nature of phenomena is that it is not truly established. And that's the subtle nature of phenomena. But if we look at the coarse nature of phenomena, a fire burns upward. That's the fire's nature. So that's what is meant by the coarse nature versus subtle nature. So coarse is just that. The coarse nature of jikdenbas, of beings who have not reached the path of seeing, is that they die. And the subtleness is their lack of true establishment. So as in the Heart Sutra, the coarse nature of fire, of something, of a phenomena such as fire, is that it burns upward. But its subtle nature is that it's not truly established, and that's the no in the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. So that's the meaning of that. Inside, I just want to make sure that nature, I couldn't remember if Rinpoche explained it or not.
That Jera Soja about the Lumen Power, that bended the Judy non Lumen Power Mudua. Bended the Judy Nagajuna, Ayadua, Buddha Balta.
Are you sure you're Mari?
And then Lumen Lenjiro, Jan Damakati, then Shanjidua, Chandarajita,
Kamala Shila,
then Makaji, what the Lumen Power Mudua.
Dharma Kirti Dignaga.
Lumen Power Damati.
Miti Dayan.
아야도 저는 그 보는 게 들어.
Gasi danso.
아야도 다 됐어. 미디타운 타워스.
Arishura.
오래.
Okay. So, so this quote is from the Garland of Birth Stories, the Jerup, the Jataka Mala, which was written by a master of many names, Miti Dayan, Lopun Bawo, or Arya Shura. And this is the master that we don't find on the wall of the 17 Nalanda Pandits, but it's a great scholar who was converted to Buddhism after debating with Arya Deva, who we find over there on the tanka in the debate posture, debating Arya Deva, I believe, if Arya Deva's over there, debating Arya Deva and being defeated by Arya Deva, and then converting to Buddhism and becoming a great scholar. So this is Lopun Bawo, and he wrote the Garland of Birth Stories. So Rinpoche said over here we have Nagarjuna, Arya Deva, Chandrakirti, Buddha Palita, Baba Vega, Kamala Shila, Shantarashita, Shanti Deva, and so forth. But we don't find Miti Dayan, Lopun Bawo, but that's who he is, and he was a Nalanda scholar.
미디타운 다 공유해서 더발 쉐르버가 그 차지 버스 차지는 그 아말라는다 나 개바시 빙스다
Lesso.
그여서 티드바 쉐르버가 가위지로
Lesso.
아마 저 개바샤 아마 저 나는 잘 선다스
Lesso.
나는 저 계속나 는 개바레스
Lesso.
나는 잘 아야도 저 쿠보
Lesso. So, the story of Arya Shura, which is most we're familiar with in English, that's what they use, Arya Shura. Just as a translator's note, the 50 verses on Guru devotion book a lot of you have is Arya Shura's Lopun Bawo Miti Dayan. So the story is that Lopun Bawo was a non-Buddhist practitioner, and he defeated all of the non-Buddhists that he debated. He was far superior, and he went to his mother and he said, I am the scholar of all scholars. I'm undefeatable. And Arya Shura's mother said to him, you have not defeated all the scholars, you must go to Nalanda. And if you go to Nalanda and you defeat all of these scholars, then you can hold this title of the greatest scholar. And went to Nalanda and was eventually defeated by Arya Deva, and then converted. He became a great scholar. So he was a great scholar of the non-Buddhist, and then became a great scholar of the Buddhist tradition. And if we look at the tenet systems of the Great Exposition School, the Sutra School, the Mind-Only School, and the Middle Way School, Middle Way Consequence and Autonomy, the Middle Way Consequence School, the highest school was the Middle Way School. The highest school, was the school of Arya Shura, of Uma Tenjor. Yeah, he was a Middle Way Prasangika practitioner, the Middle Way Consequence, which is the highest view one can hold. So a scholar of all non-Buddhist traditions, as well as a knower of all a scholar of the Buddhist tenets, and particularly the highest tenet of the Madhyamika Prasangika. Songkang. Yeah. So he was jailed in the library of Nalanda after this debate, and he began to read all of the Buddhist tenets, and he began to study them and learn them very well, and then converted to Buddhism. Dude suck.
Yeah,
You need to lock me in there. So is this text not thorough, solid? Is this text not solid? So thank you very much. And happy Mother's Day to everyone. So please make aspirations for all mothers. My mother has died. compassion.
다 sentient 하지 안 말했던 뭔가 전 뒤에서.
But all sentient beings are our mother, so we should make this aspiration for them.
Yeah.
So, concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer to Chenrezig Rinpoche. Sheda Sobudu.
Yeah.
Lamrim Chenmo Kanga Chirona. So, the fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure land. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Drosang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the three times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness. All-powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, a spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts with exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tu Rinpoche Kutsi Shapi Denona.